On February 9, 2011, police officers made a horrific discovery in a regular apartment in Maywood, USA. Human remains were found in bags in the refrigerator and also on the walls. Satanic symbols were seen everywhere, indicating that a sacrificial ritual had taken place in the house. Meraz-Espinoza was a devoted mother, which becomes evident when studying her life. Although most details of this woman's biography remain strictly confidential, we managed to find out that she was apparently born in Mexico in the late 1960s. Like many of her compatriots, she emigrated to the United States, where she spent her entire adult life. She was not alone. According to the limited information available, her other relatives also lived there, and they supported each other. At around 24 years old, Amelia gave birth to her first and only child, the beginning of the 1990s. The young mother decided to name her firstborn Moses in honor of the founder of Judaism. His full name is Moises Meraz-Espinoza, and from that moment, Amelia dedicated herself entirely to her son, ensuring that the little boy had everything he needed. Not much is known about the father, only his last name, Meraz. The information suggests that he was not always present in Moses' life, but they maintained a relationship and communicated, especially during difficult times. Over time, the small family found their home in Maywood, a small town in southeast Los Angeles, California. There, in a pink apartment complex next to an alley, mother and son moved into apartment number 11. The neighbors soon witnessed Amelia's devotion to her firstborn, but it later turned out that the boy had a fondness for a type of creepy music, which deeply disturbed the woman. She was ashamed that he disturbed the peace of society in this way. As is often the case with teenagers, Moses' musical preferences prevailed. There was no shortage of people who labeled the young man's peculiar taste as an obsession, especially for heavy metal. In return, Moses delved deeper into the world of death metal, an extreme subgenre characterized by distorted sound from low-tuned guitars. When he turned up the volume, no one nearby could ignore this music. In the heavy metal universe, King Diamond became Moses' favorite singer. His real name is Kim Bendix Peterson, a Danish musician considered one of the 100 most influential metal singers due to his distinctive voice, bizarre makeup, lyrics, and special effects in his songs. He is regarded as a unique representative of the genre, but an aspect that certainly cemented his fame was his peculiar view of Satanism. King Diamond was especially a follower of the atheistic Satanism movement, founded in the 1960s by American occultist and writer Anton LaVey. This cult had its own satanic Bible, and for King, it was not just a religion, but a philosophy of life. This made him one of the true representatives of satanic metal rock in the 1980s. In his scandalous and deeply blasphemous lyrics, Anton LaVey explained his tolerance towards various religious beliefs and also pointed out that what he considered truly alarming was humanity's ability to destroy each other in the name of God. Amelia was extremely worried about her son's strange taste and tried to convince him to diversify his musical choices, but according to neighbors, this made him angry. Moses had now chosen the dark side of his rock metal star legacy, and one of the first things he did was to buy a satanic Bible. Additionally, he added God Grin to the catalog of his preferences, a musical subgenre from the late 1980s, where the voices are so subdued that they create a frightening and even oppressive atmosphere, similar to the voices traditionally used in horror films for devilish or possessed characters. According to analysts, death metal represents fear and a certain desire to control everything perceived as a threat. Its symbolism is full of scenarios of death, destruction, supernatural horror, and violence in general. This was the world Moses immersed himself in day after day. Furthermore, he was always dressed in black and covered his body with tattoos featuring symbols that his mother found disturbing. At that time, Amelia worked as a seamstress and was a mother like any other. She always cooked meals for her son, washed his clothes, and took care of him. To their neighbors, she was a charming woman, and the impression of Moses was that he was an ordinary young man like most of the area's residents. Although Amelia neither understood nor shared her son's taste, she generally treated him with enough respect. The real reason for their frequent arguments was the music the young man listened to at full volume, especially since it disturbed the neighbor's peace. However, all other aspects of Moses' daily life, be it his social life, interests, dreams, fears, or even his psychological profile, could not be uncovered. Some reports indicate that he met a girl named Monica around mid-2010. They fell in love so deeply that they soon lived together and then both got jobs at a cookie factory. Day by day, the couple left the house with high spirits, holding hands and making plans for the future on the way. It seemed that Moses was on the right path. As his colleague Alfonso Baltasar observed, it didn't take long for the man to prove himself. He was punctual, never missed work, took his job seriously, and soon his supervisors began considering promoting him. At the same time, he and Monica wanted to study. But one day, the girl was hit by a car on the way to the factory, and it was not possible to save her. Since then, the young man's behavior changed. It is unclear whether this had happened before, but it is clear that Moses became heavily involved in the consumption of illegal psychoactive substances to cope with the pain of losing his soulmate. From that point on, violent outbursts became increasingly frequent and difficult to control. Amelia was exhausted and confused. At the age of 18, Moses locked himself in the house and within himself, and within those four walls, quarrels between him and his mother became a daily occurrence. Meanwhile, another person was worried about Moses's behavior. Liliana Rivera, his cousin, the only relative besides Amelia, whose name was revealed. At the same time, rumors among the neighbors already suggested that Amelia was afraid of her son, who was becoming increasingly aggressive and disrespectful. In late 2010, Liliana began to fear that he might harm himself or someone else because he was too involved in the satanic world. Wednesday, February 2, 2011, was not much different from any other day in the family. Moreover, there was another fierce argument between Moses and his mother. Everything indicates that Amelia once again reproached him for the loud music from his room. But this time, evil finally found a willing servant. For no apparent reason, Moses drew the curtains, turned up the volume even more, and used a rope to block the blood flow to the neck of his then 42-year-old mother. The cries for help of the woman who gave him life were drowned out by the deep chords and the voice of King Diamond from the speakers. In the end, Amelia succumbed to the attack by the person she loved most in the world. After what happened, Moses went to bed. Over the next 2 days, he considered various ways to dispose of the body. His gaze was lost until finally, his insight and instinct gave him the answer. Armed with power tools, he disposed of the remains. The operation was carried out in the bathroom. Packaged parts were then placed in the living room freezer. And then everything happened as prescribed in satanic rituals, with the use of crosses and symbols. But after a few days, Moses began to doubt his method and wondered how long he could endure like this. He climbed onto the roof of the house, put a flower pot on his head, and sat there for quite some time. Neighbors noticed his strange behavior, but assumed he was probably under the influence of illegal substances. Epifanio Hernandez, the manager of the apartment complex, told ABC News that he spoke to the young man for several days because he needed to enter the house. Moses came up with all sorts of excuses to keep him out. The neighbors were equally concerned when they saw that Amelia had not left the house for several days. They came and asked if she was okay and if they could visit her. But Moses didn't let anyone into the apartment. Epifanio explained that he was installing new sinks in all the kitchens of the apartments and insisted on entering Amelia's house, but the guy told him to come next week. All these people's concern for his mother and the urgent work of installing a new sink made Moses think it was urgently necessary to remove Amelia's remains from the house. Then he remembered that his cousin Liliana was a follower of Santeria. It was not clarified whether his concern was to get rid of problems or if it was merely to confirm his absurd act. In any case, he contacted Liliana and asked what the worst thing followers of Santeria had ever done. Given his behavior and his peculiar approach to the conversation, Liliana immediately got into her car and headed to her cousin's house. Moses was waiting in front of the house when she arrived. Liliana asked where her aunt was, to which she replied that she was not at home. But the girl had a premonition, and this time it was very bad. She insisted and asked where she was. When Moises said that Amelia had just left, Liliana felt a wave of fear wash over her. Soon, Moises confessed what he had done, but she didn't believe him. The girl said that couldn't be true. Then Liliana, with a trembling voice, asked how it happened, and Moises began to describe the entire sequence of events in detail, including the fate of the bones, skin, and weapons he used. Her cousin didn't miss any detail. He even told her that the music was used to drown out the menacing noise of the chainsaw and to avoid arousing suspicion among the neighbors. At the end of his story, Moises made a statement that was no less horrifying than the story itself. He said that after the fatal attack on his mother, he felt at peace. Moreover, he claimed that from the moment of the act, he felt like an angel. It had already been about a week, and then he asked Liliana to help him dispose of the remains. In a state of shock, with barely audible trembling in her voice, she managed to convince him to surrender, and she took him to the Huntington Park police station in South Los Angeles. Upon arrival, even before they entered the police station, Moises called his father and told him that Amelia was no longer among the living. She was sleeping, and that he had helped her leave. Since his words were quite confusing and interrupted by sobs, it was difficult for the father to understand what he was talking about. A few minutes later, Moises entered the police station. Clock showed exactly 1 p.m. when he confronted the first officer he encountered. He gave a detailed account of the crime he had committed, and when an officer arrived to take him to East Los Angeles, he was asked if he knew why he was being arrested. Moises once again answered truthfully and openly. To this officer, the guy provided an additional detail he hadn't mentioned before. Since the remains were still in the apartment he shared with his mother, the police immediately went to the house and found what can only be described as the epitome of a horror movie. In the middle of the living room lay a toppled refrigerator on the floor, and like an evil aura that one could not get rid of or even forget, stench permeated every air particle. When they opened the refrigerator, they found plastic bags containing the remains. More bags were found on the walls, a circular saw with blood, flesh, and bone fragments, and a knife in the shower. The walls in the bathroom were covered with plastic sheeting, kind painters used to protect against paint splatters, and secured with tape. Additionally, blood particles were visible in this part of the house. Further, in the adjacent room, there was a rack, and on it, the police found human bones and a skull with painted crosses. The officers also found an aerosol cleaner, which likely indicated an attempt to cover up the incident. In a search of Moises' bedroom, next to his laptop, a collection of disturbing items was found, including DVD of the movie Saw and a satanic Bible, the chapter on human sacrifice marked. Given everything they had observed so far, it was impossible to overlook the drawings on the closet door. All the images there were related to diabolical beliefs. When the neighbors saw the police officers, they said that Amelia had been afraid of her son's outbursts of aggression and had scolded him for going out at night to meet people with a dubious reputation for illegal substance consumption. Hours later, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department confirmed to the media that the body had been found. Coroner Brian Elias warned that the body could not be properly identified as it had been dismembered. As expected, the news caused an outcry. Meanwhile, Moises was detained by the sheriff and arrested on suspicion of committing the violent acts that led to his mother Amelia's death. After the news hit TV screens and public interest surged, many journalists attempted to contact the victims' relatives, hoping to shed light on this dark event. However, the only one who agreed to speak, although she refused to reveal her name or even show her face, was Liliana. Finally, autopsy results were released, and the forensic investigation revealed the cause of death to be asphyxiation, due to compression of the neck. It also described in detail all the manipulations done to the body. Meanwhile, the prosecution, ahead of the trial, tried to present numerous photos of the remains as evidence. After reviewing the images, the lower court excluded several of them, deeming them excessively violent. According to the prosecutor handling the case, Herb Marr, Moses's fatal attack on his mother was neither in the heat of passion nor impulsive or reckless. He argued that it was carried out with the intention of devotion to all dark forces, and was therefore the ultimate sacrifice. On Tuesday, February 8, 2011, Moses was officially charged with murder, but, incredibly, he pleaded not guilty. Bail in this case was set at $1 million, a figure typically set in cases where authorities are trying to keep a suspect behind bars due to their dangerousness. As a result, Moses was placed in custody at a correctional facility, with his next appearance before the East Los Angeles Municipal Court scheduled for February 23. If convicted of the brutal killing of his mother, he faced a maximum sentence of 25 years to life imprisonment. Already during the trial, the jury was shocked by the detailed report of the pathologist who testified about the deplorable condition of the body he had examined. For example, he mentioned that the fingertips appeared to have been individually removed, the sharp instrument, the entire scalp had been removed except for the eyelids. All the teeth had been extracted with their roots. Then, the testimony of an expert in the study of ritual symbols and unknown practices was presented, concluding that the position of the body suggested that Moses' actions were of a ritualistic nature. According to the specialist, each of the man's actions had magical significance for the perpetrator, and was generally a necessary function of the ritual. This meant that dismemberment and other actions were not intended to make evidence disappear, but had ritual significance, served some purpose, and were primarily a form of worship. The absolute horror was evident on the faces of both the judge and the other attendees in the courtroom. When asked about the disposal of the body in the present case, the expert stated that the measures taken went far beyond what was necessary for the simple disposal of a body. Moreover, the expert identified some of the symbolic images found on Moses's laptop, in other parts of the apartment, and on the walls as satanic symbols or traces linked to similar beliefs. Some of them were associated with the musician King Diamond, whom the expert described as a self-proclaimed follower of the Satanist Anton LaVey. Then the expert presented new information that shocked everyone even more. He explained that the date of the incident, February 2nd, indicated that the fatal attack on Amelia was not random but deliberate, as it coincided with a satanic holiday requiring very specific rituals, including human or animal sacrifice. At this point, Moses' lawyer, Jonathan Roberts, interjected, arguing that his client's involvement with the Satanic Church had been exaggerated, and adding that modern Satanists do not permit human sacrifice. The truth was that after hearing all the expert testimonies, examining the evidence, and listening to the arguments from both sides, it took the Superior Court only one day to find Moses Meraz-Espinoza guilty of first-degree murder of his mother, Amelia Espinoza. During sentencing, Los Angeles Supreme Court Judge Thomas McNew described the case as one of the most heinous, cruel, and vulgar he had encountered in nearly 50 years of his career. He sentenced Moses to life imprisonment, the possibility of parole, after 25 years. Before being taken out of the courtroom, the judge spoke directly to Moses, telling him that although he didn't know how he could change his life, he now had time to think about it. Moses' father was present in the courtroom, as were several family members. The young man looked at them as he was led out of the courtroom, said nothing.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel, and take care of yourselves. See you in the next video.